The snow had already buried half of Silverpine by the time I left the hospital. I remember standing in the dim parking lot, my breath coming out in pale clouds, the world silent except for the crunch of my boots. The night shift always left me hollow, like I'd given away too much of myself to strangers' pain. Tonight, that hollowness felt heavier. Maybe it was the way the wind clawed at my scarf, or how the mountains loomed darker than usual, swallowing the town's glow. I checked my phone, one missed call from Eli's babysitter, just saying he'd fallen asleep early. Good. My boy always worried when I came home late. I'll be there soon, I whispered, though no one could hear me. The drive home took longer than usual. The snow kept thickening, swallowing the road until my headlights painted nothing but white. The radio crackled out halfway through town, and by the time I reached the forest road that led to my house, the world felt abandoned. Our house sat on the edge of Silverpine, tucked near the treeline. It wasn't much, just a cabin I'd inherited from my mother, but it was ours. The porch light glowed faintly through the snow, a warm, in the cold distance. I remember thinking how grateful I was to see it. Then I saw something move in the light. At first, I thought it was a shadow. A branch swaying, maybe. But then the shape staggered, dragging itself across the porch like a wounded animal. My stomach knotted. I parked and stepped out slowly, boots sinking into the drift. The air bit at my skin, and I could hear nothing but the wind, until I heard a sound I'll never forget. A low, guttural whine. Hey there, I murmured, taking a cautious step closer. The shape was a wolf. Enormous, even from where I stood, fur matted with snow and something darker. Blood. My instincts warred with logic. I was a nurse. Wounds were my world. But this was wild, dangerous. You're hurt, I whispered anyway. He lifted his head, and for a moment our eyes met, gold against the night. I'd treated trauma patients, gunshot victims, children on the edge of life, but I had never seen eyes like that. There was intelligence there. Suffering, yes, but something, aware. He made a sound, half growl, half breath, and collapsed again. Against every rational thought I had, I ran forward. Snow slicked under my boots as I knelt beside him. His flank rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. I could see where something had torn through his side, a gash deep enough to expose the muscle. Gunshot? No, claw marks, maybe. Whatever had done it, he wouldn't survive the night without help. It's okay, I said, voice shaking. I'm going to help you. The words sounded absurd. A nurse talking to a dying wolf. But I couldn't just leave him there. I went back to the truck, grabbed my emergency kit, gauze, antiseptic, gloves, and returned. When I touched him, he tensed but didn't attack. His body was fever-hot beneath the fur, trembling with exhaustion. I cleaned what I could, ignoring how my fingers went numb in the cold. You poor thing, I murmured. Who did this to you? The snow thickened around us, settling on his fur like frost. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. After a while, his eyes fluttered shut. I thought he'd died, but then I felt the faint rise of his chest. Still breathing. Barely. I looked toward the cabin. It was madness, what I was thinking, bringing a wild animal inside with my son asleep upstairs, but leaving him out here meant certain death. Okay, I whispered, exhaling a shaky breath. Just for tonight. I dragged him, as gently as I could, across the porch and into the mudroom. The warmth hit us both like a sigh. I shut the door behind me, praying Eli wouldn't wake up. He was too heavy to lift all the way, so I laid him on an old blanket by the heater. The blood looked worse in the light, darker, thicker, but his breathing steadied, faintly. I sat back on my heels, brushing hair from my face. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. It wasn't pity, exactly. It was something else, like recognizing pain I'd carried myself. The storm raged outside, battering the windows. Inside, the wolf's chest rose and fell in rhythm with the howling wind. I should have gone to bed. I should have called animal control. But I couldn't. Instead, I sat there beside him for hours, watching the firelight dance across his fur. And maybe it was the exhaustion, or the whisper of the storm, but at some point I thought I saw something impossible. His shape flickering, just for a heartbeat, like the outline of a man. When I woke, the fire had gone out. For a moment, I couldn't tell whether the soft crackle I heard was wind or the echo of a dream. My neck ached from sleeping upright against the wall, the blanket had slipped to the floor. Then memory hit me like cold water, the snow, the blood, the wolf on my floor. I pushed myself up, heart thudding. Dawn bled through the curtains, thin and gray. The storm had stopped, leaving everything wrapped in silence. For a terrible heartbeat, I thought he was dead. He lay so still, chest unmoving. But when I knelt beside him, his eyes opened. Golden, steady, and frighteningly human. "You're alive," I whispered. Relief made my hands shake. I'd half expected to find a corpse, half feared I'd imagined the whole thing. "Good morning, I guess." He blinked slowly, like he understood me. The wound along his ribs looked cleaner now, the bleeding had stopped sometime in the night. I touched the edge of the bandage and found it slightly damp, but not with blood. Water. As if someone had washed it again while I slept. That didn't make sense. I glanced around the room, searching for Eli. He was still upstairs, I could hear the faint hum of his white noise machine. No one else could have. A soft noise pulled my attention back. The wolf's paw twitched. Then, impossibly, he tried to stand. "Hey, easy," I said, moving closer. "You shouldn't." He growled, low and raw, more frustration than threat. His body trembled, the sound ended in a harsh exhale before he collapsed again. "See?" I muttered. "You're not ready." I checked the wound again. The edges had knit faster than they should have. Not healed, but closing, like days had passed, not hours. Maybe adrenaline was making me see what I wanted, but I'd never seen tissue regenerate that quickly. I went to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and stared out the window while the smell filled the room. The snow was piled knee-deep against the porch railing. Silverpine was still sleeping under its white blanket, the pines heavy with frost. My phone buzzed, a message from the hospital. Could I cover an evening shift? I typed maybe. Family situation. I didn't mention that the family situation had fangs. When I turned back, the blanket where the wolf had lain was empty. My mug slipped, coffee splashed across the counter. No. The back door stood slightly open, the cold creeping in. He couldn't have gone far, not in his condition. Still, I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The morning air bit at my skin, sharp and clean. Tracks led away from the porch, large paw prints in the fresh snow, but only for a few feet. Then they changed. Half prints. Half bare footprints. I froze. The marks continued toward the treeline before disappearing altogether, as though the snow itself had decided to keep his secret. Impossible, I breathed. A branch snapped deeper in the woods. I spun, hard hammering, but saw only light filtering through the trees. "Claire?" The voice came from behind me, from inside the house. It wasn't Eli's. It was low, rough, and unfamiliar. I turned back toward the open door. A man stood there, leaning against the frame. Tall. Barefoot. Dark hair tousled, skin pale against the morning light. A blanket hung around his shoulders, the same one I'd wrapped the wolf in. And across his ribs, where fur and blood had been, I saw the faint outline of a scar still fresh. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The world was silent except for the ticking of my pulse. "You shouldn't be here," I managed finally. Who are you?" He looked at me with those same golden eyes. "You saved my life," he said. His voice was a rasp, like he wasn't used to using it. I didn't mean to frighten you. I stared at him, at the snow melting on his bare feet, at the impossible truth rising in my throat. You were the wolf, I whispered. He said nothing. Only lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his face like shadow over flame. I took a step back, unsure whether to run or reach for the first aid kit again. That's not possible. I know, he said quietly. But it's real. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of pine and something darker, like iron and rain. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything in my life began to shift. The moment I realized the stranger in my doorway wasn't just a man with a secret. He was the secret the town of Silverpine had been hiding for generations. And somehow, I had invited him in. I closed the door slowly, heart hammering so loud I was certain he could hear it. He didn't move. He just stood there, draped in the blanket, golden eyes fixed on mine. I started, then swallowed. Words felt useless. How? He shook his head. Not here. The rasp of his voice made the hair on my arms stand on end. You need to understand, some things can't be explained in words. I studied him, taking in the curve of his shoulders, the scars that marked him, the way his gaze seemed to look past me and into something far older. He wasn't lying about being hurt, but this, whatever he was, felt like a storm waiting to break. I don't care what you are, I said before I could stop myself. You're hurt. I'm a nurse. That's what I do. His lips twitched, half a smile, half a grimace. It's not that simple. I wanted to press, to demand answers, but fear rooted me to the spot. Instead, I fetched the first aid kit again. His gaze followed every move. You don't have to, he said softly. You've already done enough. I knelt beside him, pretending to adjust the blanket while stealing glances at the faint ridges of muscle under his skin. He wasn't human, not entirely. But he was alive. And hurt. And there was something painfully, achingly human in the way he closed his eyes when I touched him. For hours, we sat like that. I cleaned the rest of the minor wounds, my hands trembling despite my calm exterior. He said nothing, only letting me work, as though words were too heavy for the air. Finally, he whispered, You shouldn't have found me. I looked up sharply. Why not? Because whoever did this to me, they'll come looking again. And you have a life. A child. You shouldn't get tangled in this. I clenched my jaw. I've already gotten tangled. You didn't knock politely. You came bleeding to my door. He let out a humorless laugh. Fair point. The air between us shifted. There was danger in it, yes, but also something else, something I wasn't ready to name. Compassion, curiosity, fear, and a flicker of connection. I finally asked the question I had been holding back, my voice almost too quiet to hear, Who are you? His head bowed. I'm bound to this town, he said finally. To the forests. To the night. And to the people who live here, though they don't know it yet. I frowned. That's cryptic. You think you've seen a wolf, he said slowly. But the truth is much older. Much darker. And much more dangerous. A shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't cold. It was his words. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wrap my arms around him and make it better. I didn't do any of those things. I stayed, rooted by a mixture of disbelief and something I couldn't name. The snow outside glimmered through the windows, sunlight striking frost like a million tiny mirrors. And in that light, I saw it again, something flicker across his form, a shimmer of what I had glimpsed the night before. Claire, he said, his voice almost pleading now. If you want to help me, if you want to survive this, you need to trust me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But trust felt like a bridge I didn't know how to cross. Not with him. Not with whatever he was. And yet, I found myself nodding. "All right," I whispered. "I'll try." He lifted his head, those golden eyes locking onto mine with something like gratitude, or was it relief? "That's all I can ask," he said. For a long moment, silence wrapped around us. Outside, Silverpine slept under its blanket of snow. Inside, a dangerous, fragile bond had begun. And neither of us knew it yet, but our lives were about to change forever. The next morning, Silverpine felt different. The snow was deeper, untouched, as though the world had pressed pause while I slept. I wrapped a thick scarf around my neck and stepped onto the porch, drawn to the footprints that led into the trees. Half paw, half bear. They hadn't vanished completely, they waited for me, taunting, teasing, impossible. Rowan, or the wolf, was inside, curled on the blanket I'd left on the floor. He stirred as I returned, eyes flicking open, golden and unblinking. "You shouldn't have followed the tracks," he said quietly. "They're strange," I admitted, kneeling beside him. "I need to understand." He sighed, a sound like wind through dry leaves. "Some things," he said, "are better left unseen. Some truths are heavy." "I don't care." The words were sharper than I intended. "I care about you, whatever you are. You're hurt. You came to me. That means something. That's enough for me to want to help." He looked at me then, really looked, and I thought I saw the faintest tremor in his jaw. Vulnerability. Fear. Something human hiding beneath centuries of something else. "Very well," he said finally. "But there are rules." "Rules?" I echoed, skeptical. "You don't speak of this to anyone," he said. "No one can know. If you tell, you endanger yourself, and me. And you cannot, under any circumstances, come into the forest alone." I nodded, although my curiosity was ablaze. "I understand." He studied me for a long moment, then his gaze softened. "You have a good heart, Claire. I've noticed. That's rare." The words made me uneasy. Rare. What did that even mean? I stepped back, brushing snow from my coat. "Why me?" He hesitated. "Because you see me. Not just the wolf, not just the danger. You see," he trailed off, eyes darting away as if saying it aloud would shatter the moment. "You see the truth." The wind rattled the cabin windows. Silence fell between us, heavier than any words. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to say something that mattered, but nothing seemed enough. Hours passed like that. I tended to the small injuries still lingering, cleaned the cabin, and tried to act normal, but I couldn't ignore the tension coiling in my chest every time I looked at him. Something about Rowan was magnetic, irresistible, and terrifying all at once. And then Eli woke. I heard his soft footsteps on the stairs before he appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mom?" I smiled weakly. "Hey, buddy. You slept well?" He nodded, and I tried not to panic. Rowan shifted slightly under the blanket, half hidden, but Eli didn't notice. He never did notice things like that, at least, not yet. I knelt to ruffle Eli's hair. "I've got breakfast. Go wash up first." Eli obeyed, and I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Rowan's gaze lingered on my son, unreadable, tense, and something protective glimmered there. When Eli left the kitchen, I whispered, "He's just a child. You can't. You don't understand," Rowan said, voice low. "I never harm children. I've never, not once." "Good to know," I muttered, although my nerves refused to settle. We didn't speak much after that. The morning light shifted across the cabin, spilling over the blankets, illuminating fur, skin, and secrets. Outside, the forest waited, patient and dangerous. Inside, a fragile connection began threading between a woman and a creature bound by ancient truths. And neither of us realized it yet, but Silverpine had already begun whispering. Whispers of prophecy, of hunters, of a curse that had lain dormant for centuries. And somehow, I was part of it now. By the time I finally looked out the window, Rowan was gone. I didn't panic. Not yet. But the snow outside held his footprints, half paw, half human, and my heart thudded with the realization, this was only the beginning. I couldn't stop thinking about him. The memory of golden eyes haunted me, flickering in the corners of my mind like sunlight through snow. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, curled on the blanket, fragile and fierce all at once. I told myself it was impossible. Wolves didn't speak. Wolves didn't lie on your floor and stare at you with human eyes. Wolves didn't make your chest ache in ways you couldn't name. But Rowan, whatever he was, had done all of those things. That morning, I found him sitting at the edge of the forest, just beyond the tree line. He wasn't moving like an animal, he was poised, alert, every muscle coiled as though ready to spring. "You shouldn't be here," he said the moment I stepped off the porch. "I could say the same," I replied, brushing snow from my coat. "But I needed to see you. I need to understand." His gaze softened. Understanding comes at a cost. I wanted to argue, to demand explanations, but I swallowed the words. Instead, I knelt on the snow-dusted ground beside him. His paw, or hand, trembled faintly in the cold. "You don't have to stay in that form all the time, do you?" I asked softly. "No," he admitted. "But it is safer. For both of us. Safer." The word rang hollow. And yet, there was something in the way he looked at me, something unspoken, that made me feel needed. Protected. I leaned a little closer. "I don't care about safe." He flinched just a fraction, but didn't pull away. "I do," he murmured. "And yet, I'm drawn to you. That is dangerous." I felt my chest tighten. Dangerous. That word seemed to define everything about him. About us. For hours, we sat there, not speaking, just sharing space. The snow fell silently around us, a cold cocoon that somehow felt intimate, secret. I didn't touch him, not yet, but the nearness was enough. Enough to stir emotions I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," I admitted quietly. He smiled faintly, a ghost of humor and pain combined. "Nor you. That is why this is possible." I stared at him. Possible. Dangerous. Forbidden. And yet irresistible. By the time I returned inside, Eli was already home, buzzing with questions about school. I tucked him in after dinner, pretending everything was normal, while outside, the forest waited, patient and alive. Rowan didn't appear that night, but I knew he was close. I could feel it in the air, in the way the snow seemed to shift, in the faint, impossible warmth of the fire we had shared hours before. And that night, as I drifted into a restless sleep, I realized the truth I had been trying to deny. I cared for him. Not for the wolf, not just for the man, but for both. For the secret, the danger, the impossible pull between us. And somehow, I knew that caring was only the beginning. The storm returned that night. Not the gentle snow of days past, but a howling, white fury that turned Silverpine into a world of shadows and wind. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every creak of the cabin, every whisper of the wind through the trees, felt like a warning. My hands trembled as I gripped the blanket Rowan had left behind, wishing, hoping, fearing he would appear. And then he did. He stepped through the doorway, but this time there was no hesitation. No human restraint. His eyes glowed gold in the dim light, and his body seemed to shift with an energy I had never seen before. His wolf form was immense, muscles rippling beneath black and silver fur, fangs gleaming. But there was something human in the curve of his shoulders, in the tilt of his head, in the way he regarded me. "Claire," he said, voice low and gravelly, the growl beneath it unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here." "I told you," I said, trying to steady my voice, "I don't care. I'm not leaving you." He froze, gaze locking onto mine. For a heartbeat, the storm outside seemed to pause. Snow whipped against the windows, but inside, time itself held its breath. "You don't understand," he growled, claws scraping the floor. "Once I fully shift, once I give in to the night, there's no going back." I stepped closer, heart pounding. "I understand enough. I care about you, both of you. The man, the wolf, it doesn't matter." Something in him shifted, anger, relief, desire, fear, all colliding in that golden gaze. Slowly, cautiously, he lowered his massive head, letting our faces come close. The scent of him, wild, musky, alive, overwhelmed me, and I trembled. "I can't protect you forever," he murmured. "The hunters, the prophecy, they are coming. I'll face it with you," I whispered, though my voice shook. "Whatever it is, whatever comes. I won't run." The wolf inside him growled low, a sound that reverberated through my chest, but his eyes softened. And then, impossibly, he shifted. Slowly, painfully, the wolf form receded, leaving the man beneath, panting, golden eyes still luminous in the dim firelight. He collapsed to the floor, human again, chest heaving. "You don't know what you've done," he said hoarsely. "By staying, by trusting me, you've tied yourself to my fate." I knelt beside him, hands on his shoulders. "Then we'll face it together. I don't care about curses, prophecies, or hunters. I care about you." He stared at me, something fragile and vulnerable flickering behind those golden eyes. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he allowed himself a small, human smile. Outside, the wind shrieked, and snow fell like shards of glass. Inside, the fire crackled, casting warmth over our hands as they touched. For the first time, I realized the truth. The night he found me had changed everything. Silverpine would never be the same. My life would never be the same. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt alive. The storm raged, the forest waited, and the prophecy whispered its secrets through the mountains. But inside the cabin, against all reason and fear, a bond had formed. Dangerous, impossible, forbidden, and yet undeniable. And I knew, in the deepest part of my soul, that this was only the beginning. The snow had melted just enough to reveal patches of earth, but Silverpine still wore its winter coat like a shroud. Walking to the cabin that morning, I felt the weight of everything pressing in. Rowan, the prophecy, the hunters he had warned me about. He was waiting, as if he had known I would come, standing just beyond the tree-line. Half of him was human, the other half hinted at something more, primal. Even in daylight, there was a wildness about him that made my chest tighten. "You shouldn't have come here alone," he said, voice low, sharp with concern. "The hunters are near. They've been tracking me, and now they may follow you." I shook my head, trying to summon courage I didn't feel. "I'm not afraid of them. Not anymore. And I'm not leaving." He studied me, golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't understand. These aren't ordinary hunters. They've been looking for me for centuries. For someone like you, their attention is dangerous. You could—" "I know the risk," I interrupted, firm despite my nerves. "I'm staying because I want to help you. Because I care." He stepped closer, the forest between us shrinking until it felt like the world had folded in. The pull between us was magnetic, impossible to resist. "Caring is dangerous," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "And yet, I feel the same." For a moment, the wind stilled. Snow fell lightly on his shoulders, and I realized I could see him fully, as man and wolf intertwined. The truth of him, raw and unguarded, struck me harder than the cold ever could. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," I said. "Not of you. Not of what's coming. I want to stand beside you." His eyes softened just slightly, but there was a shadow beneath them, foreboding, warning, and yet something tender. "Very well," he murmured. "But you must trust me completely. No hesitation. The night is coming, and with it, dangers you cannot yet see. I nodded, even as my heart raced. I trust you. He took a step closer, until our shoulders nearly touched, and for the first time, I felt the possibility of something more than survival, a bond that was deeper than fear, stronger than the storm outside. Good, he said. Then we begin. And with that, the forest seemed to exhale, waiting. The snow whispered underfoot, the trees leaned in closer, and Silverpine held its breath. Because nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't see Rowan for 2 days after that night in the forest. The snow fell thick and silent, muting the world, leaving the cabin wrapped in an uneasy calm. I told myself I needed the quiet, that the distance between us would help me think clearly. But I didn't believe it. The truth was simpler, I missed him. I missed his voice, low and rough, the way he watched me like he was memorizing every breath I took. But missing him scared me even more. Because wanting him, whatever he was, meant stepping into something I couldn't control. And I'd spent years learning to survive by keeping control. When he finally appeared again, it was as if the air itself had been waiting for him. I was gathering wood near the porch when I felt the shift, the sudden awareness, the faint electric pull that told me he was close. I looked up, and there he was, half hidden by falling snow, coat dark against the pale world. You shouldn't sneak up on people, I said, forcing my voice steady. His lips curved, just slightly. If I'd wanted to sneak, you wouldn't have seen me at all. I rolled my eyes, but my pulse betrayed me. Where were you? Watching, he said simply. There were signs of movement in the northern woods. Hunters. I had to be sure you were safe. Safe. The word should have comforted me. Instead, it stung, because it reminded me how fragile that safety really was. I can't live like this, I said, setting down the bundle of wood. Wondering when they'll come. Wondering when you'll vanish again. He hesitated, his expression flickering between restraint and something rawer. If I stay too long, I put you at risk. My presence draws them. So you'd rather leave me in the dark? I snapped, the words slipping out sharper than I intended. Pretend I'm some fragile thing you need to protect instead of a person who can choose for herself? He flinched, not much, but enough that I saw it. The mighty Rowan, the creature of legend and prophecy, actually looked uncertain. I don't want you to regret choosing me, he said finally, voice low, roughened by something that wasn't quite fear. My breath caught. Regret? Yes. His eyes lifted, golden and haunted. Everyone who has ever cared for me has paid for it. Some with their lives. Some with their souls. I don't want you to be next. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed, heavy with things we weren't saying. I stepped forward until we were only inches apart. The air between us felt alive, fragile, electric, full of everything I didn't know how to say. You think fear will stop me? I whispered. It won't. I've lived through loss, pain, and loneliness. You don't scare me, Rowan. Not anymore. He exhaled shakily, eyes closing. You should fear me. I don't. And I meant it. Because in that moment, I saw not the creature, not the curse, but the man, fractured, weary, holding himself together through centuries of solitude. When he opened his eyes again, the edges of his humanity glimmered through, warm and unbearably sad. I don't know what to do with you, he murmured, almost to himself. Maybe, I said softly, you don't have to do anything. Maybe you just stay. His gaze lingered on me, as if the word stay was something foreign, something dangerous, something he didn't dare want. And for the first time, I realized that beneath the strength and the curse, Rowan was lonely, deeply, desperately lonely. That was his secret. His vulnerability. And it broke something open in me. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows across the cabin walls. I'd made tea, mostly to keep my hands busy. Rowan sat across from me, elbows on his knees, staring into the flames like he could see 1,000 years hidden in the embers. He hadn't spoken since he came inside. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy, expectant, like the moment before a storm breaks. Finally, he said, "You should know what I am." I set down my cup. "I already do." "No," he said quietly, shaking his head. "You think you do. But you don't." The tone of his voice made my chest tighten. I leaned back slightly, letting him speak. He looked up at me, eyes catching the firelight, golden, but tired. "Centuries ago, before Silverpine was even a name, there was a pact between men and wolves. The forest was sacred, its balance delicate. But man grew greedy. A hunter broke the pact, spilled blood beneath a full moon. The spirits punished him." He paused, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "That hunter was my ancestor," he said. "The curse fell on his bloodline. Every generation, one of us becomes what I am. Bound to the forest. To the moon. To loneliness." I swallowed hard. "You mean you can't break it?" "There's a prophecy," he said. A whisper passed through generations. "It speaks of a healer, someone who sees both the man and the beast, and chooses him anyway. Her compassion can bind the curse or destroy it." My heart thudded, the words hitting deeper than I wanted to admit. "A healer," I repeated softly. He nodded once. "You." I shook my head immediately. "No. I'm just a nurse. I patch wounds and take vitals, that's all." He gave a faint, almost sad smile. "You do more than heal bodies, Claire. You heal what's broken in people. You did it for me without even knowing." The words sank into me slowly, painfully. A part of me wanted to believe him, to believe I was meant for something more than endless night shifts and lonely mornings. But another part of me screamed that it was impossible. "I don't understand," I whispered. "If this prophecy is real, what happens if I fail?" His gaze darkened. "Then the curse remains. I lose myself completely. The wolf takes over, and I become what the hunters believe I already am, a monster." The word monster hung in the air like smoke. Without thinking, I reached across the space between us, laying my hand over his. His skin was warm, calloused, human. "You're not a monster," I said firmly. "Not to me." He looked at our hands, then at me, something unreadable flickering in his eyes, hope, maybe, or disbelief. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," I said, voice trembling but steady. "You said the prophecy needs someone to see both sides of you." "I do. I've seen them. And I choose to believe you're more than the curse that binds you." His breath caught, and for a moment, I thought he might pull away. But he didn't. He turned his hand, his fingers brushing against mine, slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't choose me," he said, voice rough with something that wasn't anger. "Because once you do, the forest will know." "The forest?" He nodded, gaze flicking toward the window. The snow had stopped, and outside, the trees stood still and dark. "It listens. It remembers. And if it believes the prophecy has begun, others will come for you, hunters, spirits, old powers that want this curse to remain." I should have been terrified. Maybe I was. But under the fear was something else, something fierce and fragile all at once. "Let them come," I said softly. "I'm not running." His eyes widened, as if the words had struck something deep. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not the small, guarded one I'd seen before, but something real, something almost human. And in that flicker of warmth, I saw him, the man he might have been, if not for the curse. The man I could fall in love with, if I wasn't careful. By dusk, the peace that had settled over the cabin began to unravel. It started with the silence. No birds, no wind, not even the usual creak of the pines. Just stillness, deep, unnatural stillness. Rowan felt it first. He was standing by the window when his posture changed, his head tilting slightly, every muscle tensing like a bowstring. "They're here," he said. "Who?" I asked, though my gut already knew. He turned toward me slowly, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The hunters. They've crossed into the valley. My stomach clenched. How many? Too many. He moved to the door, fast and quiet, checking the lock. I could see the change ripple through him, not a full transformation, but a sharpening. His pupils narrowed, his breathing deepened, the faint outline of something inhuman flickered under his skin. What do we do? I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. You hide, he said. And you do not come out until I say so. No, the word left my mouth before I could stop it. You said they're after both of us. I'm not hiding while you face them alone. He turned to me, eyes blazing. Claire. Don't. I stepped forward. Don't ask me to pretend I'm powerless. I've spent too much of my life afraid of things I couldn't control. I won't do it again. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, he nodded. Stay close to me, no matter what happens. Outside, the wind rose suddenly, carrying with it the faint echo of voices, distant but approaching. I could make out flashes of movement between the trees. Lanterns. Rifles. Rowan exhaled once, steadying himself. They don't care about truth, he said. To them, I'm just the monster they've been hunting since the first blood was spilled. Then let's show them they're wrong, I said. He gave a humorless smile. If only it were that simple. The first shot came without warning, a crack that split the night wide open. The window shattered, glass scattering across the floor. I ducked instinctively, heart hammering. Rowan growled, the sound so deep it vibrated through my bones. Stay behind me. Before I could respond, he was already moving, faster than I'd ever seen him. He blurred through the doorway, into the storm of snow and darkness outside. I hesitated only a moment before grabbing the lantern and following. The forest was chaos's flickering lights, shadows darting between trees, the sharp scent of gunpowder mingling with pine. I caught glimpses of movement, Rowan's dark shape, larger than human, weaving through the night like smoke. Then I saw him fall. Rowan. I ran, ignoring the shouts behind me, the sting of cold air in my lungs. He was on one knee, hand pressed to his side where blood, dark and startlingly human, stained the snow. Don't, he said, his voice ragged. You have to run. Not without you, I said fiercely, crouching beside him. He stared at me, pain flickering across his face, and for a moment I thought he might argue. But then he laughed, a soft, broken sound that didn't belong in this moment at all. You really are the healer from the prophecy, he murmured. I tore a strip from my coat and pressed it against the wound. Prophecy or not, I'm not letting you die. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Rowan's eyes flared gold, his breathing quickened, and then, in a single motion that felt like the forest itself exhaling, he changed. The transformation wasn't violent, it was beautiful, terrible, inevitable. His body lengthened, fur spilling across skin, light glinting off his claws. When he rose, he towered above me, golden eyes burning. The hunters froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rowan let out a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the trees themselves. The hunters broke, retreating into the shadows, their lights scattering like fireflies. And then it was quiet again. I stepped forward, my hand trembling as I reached out. His fur was warm beneath my fingers, coarse but familiar. It's over, I whispered. You're safe. He turned his head, meeting my gaze, and for a moment, just a moment, the wolf's eyes softened. The snow fell again, slow and gentle, covering the blood, the fear, the footprints. The world went still. And in that stillness, I realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for me. The moon rose early that night, pale and swollen, casting the forest in silver light. By the time it cleared the treetops, Rowan was pacing outside the cabin, his movements too sharp, too restless. I can feel it coming, he said. The pull. I watched him from the porch, wrapped in a blanket, heart pounding. Can't you fight it? I've tried. He looked at me, and the gold had already begun to show in his eyes. The moon doesn't ask. It takes. The air between us tightened. He was still Rowan, the man who had bled on my doorstep, who had laughed, however briefly, but I could see the other part of him stirring, the wildness beneath his skin. Then let me stay with you, I said quietly. He froze. No. Claire, it's too dangerous. I'm not leaving you. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue again. He just turned away, breathing hard, hands flexing like he was holding back the tide itself. The forest whispered around us. Every sound felt louder, the rustle of branches, the low creak of ice. And beneath it all, a deeper rhythm, his heartbeat, unsteady and fast. When the first shudder hit him, I stepped forward without thinking. He dropped to one knee, bracing himself against the snow, a low sound tearing from his throat. It wasn't a growl exactly, more like a cry caught halfway between pain and defiance. Rowan, I whispered. Go inside, he rasped. Now. But I couldn't. I knelt beside him, close enough to see the change ripple through him again, light and shadow twisting across his skin. It was both horrifying and beautiful, the raw power of it. I should have been afraid. Maybe part of me was. But another part, deeper and older, understood. He wasn't losing himself. He was becoming what he'd always been meant to be. When he lifted his head again, the wolf's eyes stared back at me, bright, fierce, and terribly human. It's still you, I said softly. He shook, torn between the beast's instinct and the man's will. You shouldn't see me like this. Then who should I see? I asked. The version you think I can handle? Because that's not real. This is. He went still, the moonlight painting him in silver. For a long time, we didn't speak. I simply stood there, feeling the pulse of the forest, the pull of the moon, the fragile thread that tethered us both to this strange, impossible moment. Finally, he took a step toward me, slow, deliberate. His breathing steadied. The wildness didn't vanish, it settled, folding into the air between us like a second heartbeat. Every full moon I lose something, he said, his voice rough, half-human. But tonight, standing here with you, I don't feel lost. Something in me broke open at that. I reached out and touched his face, the line of his jaw, the warmth of his skin beneath the faint shimmer of fur. Then don't fight it, I whispered. Just be. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, it felt like the entire forest exhaled with us. The moon hung above us, full and watchful, and in its light, I saw everything, the curse, the man, the wolf, and the fragile, forbidden love that bound us together. It wasn't safe. It wasn't simple. But it was real. And when his hand, still rough, still human, found mine, I knew this night would change everything. The forest was silent again by dawn. The storm had passed, and in its wake, Silverpine looked almost innocent, snow glittering on the branches, mist curling above the frozen stream. But nothing felt the same. Rowan stood near the edge of the trees, half in shadow, still and watchful. His shirt was torn, streaked with blood, but his breathing was calm now. The gold in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by that familiar, quiet sadness. You stayed, he said softly, without turning. I told you I would. He nodded once. You shouldn't have. I stepped closer, boots crunching on the frost. You keep saying that. And yet you're still here too. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The wind brushed through the trees, scattering snow like stardust. You saw what I am, he said finally. Not just the surface. The part that can't be contained. I saw a man fighting a curse, I said. And winning. He almost smiled. Almost. You think I was in control? I think you chose not to hurt anyone. That's control. He let out a breath that might have been a laugh, or maybe a sob. You don't understand what that night costs me. Every transformation takes a piece of me. The wolf remembers pain differently. The memories blur. He glanced at me then, eyes full of something I couldn't name. Sometimes, I forget the sound of my own voice. The words hit me like a chill. Then I'll remind you, I said quietly. As many times as it takes. He looked away, jaw tight, as though the offer hurt more than the wounds. When I reached for his hand, he didn't pull away. His skin was cold, rough under my fingers. I could feel the tremor in him, not from weakness, but from restraint. I thought the worst was over, I said. That the hunters were gone. They are, he said. But the forest isn't done with us. The way he said it made the back of my neck prickle. What do you mean? The balance has shifted. The prophecy you woke, it isn't quiet anymore. The spirits are stirring. I frowned. Spirits? He nodded. The old ones. They watch the cursed bloodlines. When a prophecy begins to fulfill itself, they test it. Sometimes with storms. Sometimes with dreams. A gust of wind swept through the clearing then, sudden and sharp, as if the forest itself had heard his words. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders. What kind of dreams? His gaze met mine, and something in it made my heart falter. The kind that don't end when you wake. Before I could answer, the air seemed to shift, colder, heavier. A sound whispered through the trees, faint but distinct. Not the wind. Not an animal. Words. My name. Claire. It was soft, distant, but unmistakable. I turned, searching the tree-line, my pulse hammering. Did you hear that? Rowan's face went still. He stepped between me and the forest, eyes narrowing. Go inside. Now. Rowan. Now. His tone left no room for argument. I backed toward the cabin, my breath fogging the air. I could still feel it, that strange, invisible pull, the forest breathing around me, aware of me. When I reached the door, I looked back once. Rowan stood in the clearing, a lone figure against the rising sun, his shadow long across the snow. And then I saw them, faint shapes moving between the trees, tall and indistinct, like smoke given form. Watching. For the first time, I realized the forest wasn't just background to this story. It was alive. And it had chosen its side. Sleep used to be a refuge. Now it feels like falling through water, quiet at first, then heavy, then impossible to breathe. The first dream came the night after Rowan warned me. I was standing in the forest again, barefoot, snow melting against my skin. Moonlight pooled on the ground like spilled silver. The trees leaned closer, whispering in a language I almost understood. Then I saw it, a single wolf's paw print glowing faintly in the frost. When I bent to touch it, the snow burned my fingertips and a woman's voice spoke behind me. He cannot be freed without your surrender. I woke gasping, heart pounding, the cabin dark except for the dying glow of the fire. Rowan was gone. For a moment, panic clawed up my throat. Then I saw the door, still closed, the lock untouched. He hadn't left, he'd simply vanished into the night again, drawn by whatever forces ruled him. I pulled on my coat and stepped outside. The cold bit deep, but I barely felt it. The world was too quiet, too expectant. Rowan? My voice carried and came back hollow. A shadow moved near the tree-line. He emerged slowly, human again but unsteady, his skin pale as the snow. When he saw me, something flickered in his eyes, fear, not for himself but for me. You heard her, he said hoarsely. I froze. The voice? He nodded. The forest speaks to you now. It's begun. The prophecy. He closed the distance between us, his hand finding my wrist. You're connected to it. That means they can reach you, through your dreams, your thoughts. You must guard your mind, Claire. How? I asked, shaking. How do I fight something that lives in the air? Not by fighting. His voice softened. By knowing what's real. He guided my hand to his chest. His heartbeat was strong beneath my palm, warm and steady. This is real, he said. Me. You. Whatever happens, hold to that. I wanted to believe him, but that night, when I finally drifted back to sleep, the forest found me again. This time, the dream was darker. The same path through the pines, but the trees bled shadow, and in the distance stood a figure cloaked in antlers and mist. It raised a hand, and I saw a mark glowing on its palm, the same pattern that had shimmered once beneath Rowan's skin. The voice came again, closer now, one must be bound for the other to be free. I woke screaming. Rowan was already beside me, his hands gripping my shoulders, his eyes fierce and frightened. Claire. What did you see? I tried to speak, but the words caught. I could still feel the echo of the voice in my bones. Finally, I managed. It wants me to choose. Between us. He went still. The firelight cut across his face, and for the first time, I saw pure terror there. That's what the prophecy never said, he whispered. The healer doesn't just break the curse. She takes it. The room seemed to tilt. Takes it? He met my eyes, gold brightening like embers. If the forest means what I think it does, saving me means damning yourself. I sat there in the silence that followed, heartbeat roaring in my ears. The weight of his words pressed down, cold and merciless. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint howl of a wolf, long, distant, and unbearably sad. Rowan turned toward the sound, shoulders rigid. They know, he said softly. The spirits. The hunters. All of them. The choice is coming. And as I watched him standing there, framed by the pale light of dawn, I understood something terrible and true. Every love has its cost. Ours was just waiting to be paid. By the third night, I stopped trusting the sunrise. Light no longer meant safety. Sometimes it just meant the dream hadn't ended yet. I was bandaging Rowan's shoulder when I first noticed it, the faint shimmer on my fingertips. At first I thought it was frost, catching the firelight. But the glow lingered, tracing a pattern like veins of silver. When I blinked, it was gone. Claire? Rowan's voice was rough. You're shaking. I'm fine, I lied, tying the knot tighter than it needed to be. He caught my hand before I could pull away. No, you're not. There was fear in his touch, though his grip was gentle. It's spreading, he murmured, staring at my palm. The forest's mark. It's claiming you. I don't want it, I whispered. Neither did I, he said, and for a heartbeat, the distance between us dissolved. We were two people bound by something older than choice. Outside, the wind changed. It carried the faint sound of chanting, low, rhythmic, almost human. I went to the window. Lanterns flickered in the woods again. They've returned, Rowan said. Hunters, but not the same ones. These are guided. By who? He looked toward the dark horizon. By what watches us? The chanting grew louder. I saw the figures now, moving slowly through the trees, their torches forming a circle of light. The sound wasn't just words, it was a summons. The snow around the cabin trembled. Rowan stepped in front of me. Stay behind me, no matter what you see. Before I could answer, the ground cracked open with a sharp, crystalline sound. Light poured from the fissure, pale, cold, familiar. My mark pulsed in answer. I gasped, clutching my hand, but the light didn't stop. It spread across the snow, carving shapes like roots. Rowan turned to me, eyes blazing gold. You're linked to them. To the forest itself. It's trying to speak through you. I can't, the rest of the words dissolved in a rush of heat and cold. My vision blurred. The cabin vanished. I was in the woods again, standing in that same clearing of my dreams. Only this time, Rowan was there too. He looked human, but faint lines of light crawled beneath his skin, echoing mine. The antlered figure stood behind him, its eyes like hollow stars. It spoke in a voice that was not one but many. Two halves of the same wound. One must seal the other. Rowan turned to me. Don't listen. The forest erupted in white light. For a second, I felt everything, the pulse of the trees, the breath of the snow, the slow, eternal rhythm of the wolf's heart. And within it, a second heartbeat, my own, merging with his. When the light faded, I was back in the cabin, gasping for air. The chanting was gone. The hunters were gone. Rowan knelt beside me, face pale, eyes wild. Claire. What did you see? I think I touched the forest, I whispered. And it touched back. He reached for me, hesitated, then drew his hand away. You're changing. I looked down. The silver shimmer had spread to my wrist, faint but real, tracing the same pattern that marked him. Outside, the first snowflakes of a new storm began to fall. We both knew it then, whatever barrier had kept the curse contained was breaking. And somehow, I was becoming part of it. The storm had swallowed Silverpine whole. Snow fell in heavy, slow spirals that muffled every sound. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low and golden, the only light left in the world. Rowan sat across from me, his shoulders tense, the marks on his skin glimmering faintly where the collar of his shirt had torn. He looked like a man made of light and shadow, something caught between two worlds. I should have told you everything, he said at last. I shook my head. You've told me enough. No, he said, voice breaking. You deserve the truth, even if it drives you away. He rose and came closer. The air between us shifted, filled with the faint scent of pine and smoke. His hands trembled when he rested them on the back of the chair across from me, like he needed the distance but couldn't stand it either. The curse isn't just blood and moonlight, he said softly. It's love twisted into punishment. My ancestor, he wasn't cursed because he killed the sacred wolf. He was cursed because he betrayed the one who loved him. The spirits wanted him to feel that loss forever. My breath caught. So every generation. He nodded. One of us is bound to find someone who can break the curse, but only through love. And every time, the forest takes her before she can. The weight of his words settled over us. The fire popped softly, like it was listening. So you think I'm the healer, he finished quietly. Yes. He looked at me then, really looked, his eyes bright and unguarded. But it's more than that, Claire. The forest chose you because you saw me. Not the monster. Not the curse. Just me. The way he said it cracked something open in me. All the fear and doubt and confusion I'd been carrying for days gave way to one sharp, aching truth: I loved him. It wasn't sudden. It had been building quietly, between the silences, the shared glances, the small moments of trust. But now it was undeniable, and it terrified me. Rowan, I said, barely a whisper. If what you're saying is true, then loving you could kill me. He nodded, his jaw tight. That's why I tried to keep you away. The firelight flickered across his face, carving him into gold and shadow. I rose, closing the space between us. And what if I don't care? He inhaled sharply, as if the words hurt. You should. But I don't. I reached for his hand, fingers brushing the edge of the mark that tied us both to the curse. I've been alone for so long, Rowan. Afraid of needing anyone. And then you showed up, bleeding on my porch, and somehow everything that was broken in me started to feel alive again. He looked down at our joined hands, the silver light pulsing faintly beneath our skin. You don't understand what it would mean. To free me is to take the curse yourself. Then let me, I whispered. He closed his eyes. You can't say that. Why not? Because I couldn't survive it. The words slipped out before I could stop them, then let's survive it together. He opened his eyes, and something in them changed. The fear, the restraint, they shattered. He reached up, tracing his thumb along my jaw as if memorizing the moment. Claire. My name in his voice felt like a promise and a goodbye all at once. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the fire dimmed to embers, the room shrinking to nothing but warmth and the sound of two hearts that had finally stopped running. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. It wasn't that kind of night. It was the kind where truth itself was a kind of touch. And as the wind howled against the cabin walls, I realized that love, real love, wasn't the opposite of fear. It was what made us face it. The snow stopped falling just before midnight. The clouds tore open, and the moon rose red and immense, staining the forest in its light. It wasn't a gentle red, it was the color of heartbeats, of endings and beginnings. Rowan and I stood at the edge of the clearing where the first blood had been spilled centuries ago. The air felt alive, vibrating with whispers that weren't wind. This is where it began, he said quietly. And where it always ends. The marks on our skin shimmered in unison, silver threaded with faint crimson. The forest was listening. Waiting. What happens now? I asked. He looked at me, the gold in his eyes almost gone. The curse will try to bind itself. It will choose the stronger will, mine or yours. If it takes you, I'll lose you. If it takes me, I'll lose myself. And if we refuse? No one's ever tried, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth. The silence pressed closer. The pines leaned toward us like witnesses. Somewhere in the distance, the wolves began to howl, a slow rising chorus that made my pulse stutter. Rowan took my hands. Whatever happens, don't let go. Light flared between us as bright, painful, beautiful. The forest surged, the ground trembling. I felt the curse like a current, pulling at me, at him, twisting through our joined hands. Images flashed in my mind, the first hunter, the dying wolf, generations of loneliness and guilt. Then I heard it again, the woman's voice from my dreams. One must be bound for the other to be free. But beneath it, another sound rose, faint, steady, familiar. Rowan's heartbeat. No, I whispered. Not bound. Not like this. The light thickened, clawing for my thoughts. I focused on the warmth of his fingers, the steadiness of his breath. If the curse feeds on pain, then we break it with mercy. The glow wavered. Rowan looked at me, eyes wide. Claire, what are you? I tightened my grip. We forgive them. All of them. The hunter, the spirits, the forest. We end it by letting go. The moment stretched, sharp and still. Then something shifted in the air, like a breath released after centuries of holding. The light turned white, soft, weightless. The ground stilled. The marks on our hands dimmed to pale gold. When the glow faded, we were still standing, still holding each other. The forest was silent again, but not empty. Peaceful. Expectant. Rowan's voice was rough. Did it work? I looked up at the blood moon. It was fading to silver. I don't know. But I think it listened. He laughed once, softly. You changed the rules. Maybe they were never rules, I said. Maybe they were just waiting for someone to ask differently. We stood there until dawn touched the trees. The marks no longer burned, only glowed faintly like old scars. For the first time since the night he appeared at my door, I felt something that wasn't fear or sorrow. Hope. When I woke, the world was too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the moment after a heartbeat, fragile, suspended, waiting to see if life will return. The fire had gone out. Pale light seeped through the frosted windows, soft and silver instead of red. Snow still blanketed the ground, but it no longer glittered like glass. It breathed, gentle wisps of fog rising from its surface, as if the forest itself were exhaling. Rowan was beside me, asleep for the first time in what felt like centuries. His skin looked warm again, not that ghostly shimmer of fever in moonlight. The faint golden thread of the mark on his wrist pulsed quietly, matching my own. Alive. Human. Ours. I sat up slowly, careful not to wake him. Every bone in my body ached, but it was a sweet ache, the kind you feel after weeping too long or dancing barefoot through cold grass. When I opened the door, the air smelled new. The storm had stripped the forest clean. No scent of blood, no echo of old anger. Only pine, frost, and the faint sweetness of something blooming beneath the snow. For a moment I just stood there, watching the first thin rays of daylight spill over Silverpine's ridge. The world looked the same, and yet I knew it wasn't. Behind me, Rowan stirred. "You're awake early." "So are you," I said, turning to him. He was leaning in the doorway, hair tousled, wrapped in a wool blanket that made him look impossibly human. He smiled, faint and disbelieving. "I can hear the forest again. But it's different now. Quieter." "Maybe it's resting," I murmured. He came to stand beside me, shoulders brushing mine. For a long while, we watched the light grow. The town lay far below us, tiny and distant, smoke rising from chimneys. Life had gone on down there, people baking bread, warming their hands, unaware that the world had nearly shifted beneath them. "Do you think it's really over?" I asked. Rowan hesitated. "I think it's beginning again. Just not as a curse this time." Something inside me loosened. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding fear until that moment. The forest hummed faintly around us, a low, contented sound like the heartbeat of the earth. The mark on my wrist glowed once, then faded, leaving only warmth behind. I leaned my head against Rowan's shoulder. "Then let's see what a beginning feels like." He turned, pressing a soft kiss to my hair. "Together?" "Always," I said. The sun crested the ridge, and the light spilled over us, golden and clean. The first day after the curse began with quiet, and a promise neither of us dared to speak aloud. That peace, no matter how fragile, was something worth protecting. We reached Silverpine by noon. The snow on the road had already softened, and water trickled down the ditches in silver ribbons. Every sound felt too loud, the creak of wagon wheels, the chatter of sparrows. Life had simply gone on. People stared when they saw us. Not in fear, not exactly. More in the way someone looks at a face they half remember from a dream. "Claire?" Mrs. Hadley, the baker, stopped sweeping her porch. "We thought you were snowed in up at the ridge. Did the power lines ever come back?" I smiled automatically, the way you do when your heart's not sure what to say. "Eventually," I lied. Rowan stayed a step behind me, hood pulled up. His eyes darted everywhere, windows, lampposts, the church steeple that glinted like a blade in the weak sun. I could tell he was listening for the forest even here, its pulse somewhere beneath the frozen ground. Inside the clinic, everything smelled the same: antiseptic, coffee gone stale, the faint scent of the pine-scented candles someone always forgot to blow out. My locker still held my uniform. My name badge hung there, cold metal against my thumb. Home, and not home. "You don't have to stay," Rowan murmured. "If this is too." "No," I said quickly. "I need to remember who I was before the door opened that night." He nodded but didn't look convinced. By late afternoon, the town square was alive again. Kids dragged sleds through slush, someone tuned a guitar near the gazebo. The world had forgiven the storm. Maybe it had never known it needed to. Rowan and I found a bench beneath the old clock tower. The sun was setting, and the snow reflected its colors like fire on glass. For the first time, I noticed the faint shimmer along the tree line far beyond town, like breath, faint and silver. "The forest," I whispered. He followed my gaze. "It's watching. Do you think it misses us?" He smiled faintly. maybe it's learning to let us go. I studied his profile, the calm lines that hadn't been there before. The wildness in him had quieted, but not vanished. It lived in his eyes like a secret he carried with pride now, not shame. We could leave, I said softly. Go somewhere warm. Start over. He was silent a long moment. And if the forest calls again? Then we'll answer, I said. But on our terms. He reached for my hand, and the mark under our skin flickered once, like a heartbeat. The air between us smelled of pine and bread and smoke, Silverpine, our strange little world. I realized then that returning didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to stand between what was ordinary and what was eternal, and calling both of them home. As the clock struck 6, the first lamps flickered on. Rowan squeezed my hand. Together, he asked again. Always, I whispered. And this time, the town bells rang like an answer. It began with a sound so faint I thought it was the wind. 3 nights after we came back to Silverpine, I woke to the soft hum of something just outside the window, like breath caught in branches. Rowan was asleep beside me, his heartbeat steady under my palm. The snow outside glowed blue under the moonlight, unbroken except for a single trail of prints leading away from the cabin. Small. Barefoot. Human. I went outside in my robe and boots, breath fogging the air. The cold wasn't sharp anymore, it felt watchful. At the edge of the trees, I heard it again, words shaped in a whisper. Healer, keeper, remember. The voice wasn't frightening. It was the same tone the forest used the night it forgave us, sad, ancient, gentle. I closed my eyes and listened. Beneath the whisper was the slow heartbeat of the land, faint but alive. When I opened them again, a small white flower had bloomed through the snow. Its petals glowed faintly, frost clinging like silver dust. I crouched and touched it. The mark on my wrist warmed, and the flower tilted toward my hand like it recognized me. Behind me, the door creaked. Claire? Rowan's voice, low and careful. What is it? I turned, still kneeling. It's listening again. He came closer, the moonlight catching the gold in his eyes. I thought it would fade after the blood moon. Maybe it can't, I said. Maybe we woke something that wants to stay awake. He looked at the flower, then at me. Does it hurt? No, I smiled faintly. It feels like it's breathing with me. He exhaled, relief and worry tangled together. Then maybe that's the point. It isn't a curse anymore. It's connection. I brushed snow from the petals. Do you think it'll ever stop calling? He reached out, fingers tracing the scar on my wrist. No. And I don't think we'd want it to. For a while, we stood there under the pale sky, surrounded by the quiet pulse of the sleeping forest. The whisper faded, leaving behind only stillness. But when I closed my eyes, I could still feel it, a thread stretching between my heartbeat and the earth's, thin and unbreakable. Inside, the fire was still warm. I lay beside Rowan, listening to his breathing, wondering if the forest dreamed the way people did. And just before sleep claimed me, I heard it once more, not from outside, but from somewhere inside my chest. Thank you. Rowan started fading a week after the whisper. It was subtle at first, longer silences, slower steps, the way he stared into the trees as if trying to read something written on the air. You're tired, I said one morning. You haven't slept properly since the storm. He smiled, but his skin looked too pale against the firelight. It's nothing. Just quiet inside me now. But it wasn't quiet, it was hollow. The warmth that used to pulse under his skin had cooled. The mark on his wrist no longer glowed, it was dull gold, a scar without heartbeat. By the 3rd day, he could barely stand. I carried him to the bed and lit every candle in the cabin, pretending light could keep him anchored. His breath came shallow, and his eyes, when they opened, had the faraway glaze of someone listening to a sound I couldn't hear. The forest, he whispered. It's pulling back. My throat tightened. Then I'll go to it. I'll ask what it wants. No, his hand caught mine, weak but insistent. It's not asking. It's giving. To you. I froze. What do you mean? He looked at me then, a faint smile touching his lips. You forgave it, Claire. That wasn't free. The words struck like cold water. No. I didn't bargain, You didn't have to. The forest took your mercy and made it law. It's bound to you now. Something inside me shivered. I pressed my palm to my chest. My heartbeat was too strong, echoing with a second, slower rhythm, the same pulse I'd felt beneath the snow. I can fix this, I said, half to myself. There has to be a way to give it back. Rowan's eyes softened. You always think love means saving someone. Because it does, I snapped. He smiled faintly. Sometimes it means staying, even when you can't fix it. The candles guttered as wind pressed against the windows. I could feel the forest stirring, restless. The mark on my wrist burned, not pain, but awareness. I knelt beside him, pressing our hands together. Then stay with me. Don't fade. For a moment, the gold in our scars flickered. The air smelled of pine and rain. Then, just as suddenly, it dimmed again. His voice was barely audible. If I disappear, follow the light in the trees. It will know you. I shook my head fiercely. You're not leaving. He smiled, eyes closing. Then wake me when the forest blooms. And he went still. The room fell silent except for the whisper of the snow outside. I pressed my ear to his chest, faint heartbeat, slow but present. Alive, but slipping. The mark on my wrist glowed brighter. I felt it then, the pull, the connection opening like a door. The forest wanted me to follow. I stood, wrapping myself in my coat. All right, I whispered to the night. If you want me, show me the way. Outside, the wind rose, and far off through the trees, a line of lights appeared, soft, golden, leading deeper into Silverpine's heart. I didn't look back.